What's up, everybody? Welcome to the castle. My name is Silver Knight, and today I'm going to be bringing you guys my 2023-2024 Premier League predictions. So, the way that we're going to be doing this, we're going to have a couple of different ways. The first way is I'm going to be talking about every single team in alphabetical order and placing them into a tier that I believe that they belong in. These tiers go as follows. We have our title chasers up at the top. We have our Champions League challengers right after that. Those are the people that I don't think have a chance at the title, but I still think can get into that top five. After that are the people I think are not going to necessarily be in the Champions League, but still have a pretty good chance at getting into European competition. After that are the teams that I don't feel have a chance at Europe, but I also don't think are going to get caught into a relegation battle. We're going to call those guys on a beach. And then below that are the people that I think have the best chance of going down this season. And then once we get all these teams into our tier list, we're going to be putting them into our 1 through 20 ranking. And so let's go ahead and get started with Arsenal. Arsenal, for me, I feel has not taken any steps backwards this off-season. I feel like they've only taken steps forward with the addition of Declan Rice and with Kai Havertz. I think those two players are going to be extremely crucial, especially Kai Havertz now that Gabriel Jesus seems to be having an injury that could affect his early season minutes. So I think it was really nice for them to be able to pick up Kai Havertz, who can play in that position alongside Nketiah. I do think that they are going to be extremely hungry this season. I mean, they spent 248 days as top of the Premier League. That's the most ever in history for a team that didn't win. And since they are so young, I think they're going to be able to bounce back and be really, really hungry for that title this season. I mean, they had a taste of it, and now they want the full meal. For me, their key player this season is going to be Leandro Trossard. I think he is going to establish himself as a starter in Arteta's squad really early on this season. I think with the fact that Gabriel Jesus is going to be out early, will give him a lot of minutes early. And I think he will be able to establish himself as part of that midfield alongside Declan Rice and alongside Martin Odegaard. I think he is going to be a very crucial part in creating that elevated level of play that they are going to be looking for going into this season. So for me, because I don't feel like they've taken any steps backwards, I'm still going to be putting them right up there in that title chasers tier. I don't see them taking any steps backwards, and I really do believe that they have a chance at challenging for that title once again this season. All right, next up we have Aston Villa. So Aston Villa obviously making it into Europe for the first time in a really long time. Is that going to affect how they play this season? I personally believe that with the way that Unai Emery plays, I don't think it'll affect them too much throughout their season performance. I do think they've made some incredible additions in Diaby and Tielemans. I think either one of those players will become really crucial starters, whether that is going to be in Europe or in the Premier League, and I think that they're going to be able to create a lot of chances for that team to score goals. And for that, I'm going to be putting them into my Champions League challengers tier. That might be a little bit of a surprise, but I really do feel like that team has only gotten better through the offseason. I really don't see how they could be any worse from last year, and with the fact that they've had so much momentum at the end, I think they can really build on that and move forward into it. I think their key player this season is going to be Ollie Watkins. I think their one concern is that they don't have very good depth in that center forward position. So I think as long as he stays healthy, I feel like Aston Villa will be able to score a lot of goals through that center forward position. But if he does get injured or if he, has a bad run of form, I feel like it's going to really affect how many goals they're going to be able to score and how Unai Emery wants to play. So I think that he is their key player this season. All right, next up we're going to be talking about Bournemouth. So, where does Bournemouth go from last season? Last year, every single person had them going down, and then in that January transfer window, they were able to pick up the players that they needed to get the points at the end of the season to stay up. Do they continue that momentum? Obviously, they have lost Gary O'Neill, who was a very crucial part in that survival fight, but can this new manager do the same thing? I don't believe that they've gotten any worse. They've made a couple of additions that I don't think are going to help them right away. They've gotten some young players that I think will help them down the line. But the other thing is, where are the goals going to come from? We saw a lot of last season where there was no goals coming from Bournemouth, and they kind of were winning in little dog fights that they were having. But Can they do it something different this season? I think the key player for them because of that is going to be Traore, that they were able to sign on a full after their loan last season. I think that player, coming off of the injuries that he had last season, it's crucial for him to get back in form in terms of scoring goals and getting assists from that wing position. So because of that, I don't see Bournemouth having a relegation battle again this season. I really do believe that come April time, they're going to be kind of relaxed. I don't think they're going to have to do the same thing that they did last season, especially because I think the bottom part of this tier, like the bottom tiers of Premier League, are a lot worse this season than they were last season. I think the promoted teams this season are a lot worse than they were last season. I mean, look at last season. All three of the promoted teams stayed up. That is completely unheard of usually. So the fact that it was able to occur last season is huge, and I think that AFC Bournemouth is only going to take that momentum and ride it a little bit higher to be safer a little bit earlier this season. Okay, next up, we're going to be talking about Brentford. These are my bees. This is my favorite team, and I am going to be cheering for them all season. But how do they fare in terms of against the rest of the Premier League? And I think that can be answered with two names: David Raya, Ivan Toney. These are two players that last season were absolutely crucial in their success, and the fact that they were only 90 minutes away from playing in Europe this season. Ivan Toney is obviously suspended for the first half of the season, and then David Raya has moved on to Arsenal, it appears, so we're not going to have him either. He was statistically the best goalkeeper of the entire league last season, so to lose him is a huge blow. We have picked up a defender in Nathan Collins from Wolves that I feel like will shore up that front line in front of the goalkeeper, but obviously with how many saves and the incredible saves that David Raya was able to make last season, is that going to be able to continue with how few goals we gave up? The other thing is, at the attacking end, who is able to produce as much as Ivan Toney? For this reason, I'm going to do a little bit of a cheat and say that our key players this season are going to be a combination of Yoane Wissa and Kevin Schade. I think either one of those need to step up into that role that Ivan Toney had, become a for sure starter, and be able to produce goals. It might be production by committee as opposed to a single player in Ivan Toney, but I don't think we're going to fall off too far from that goal scoring ability. That being said, with Ivan Toney being out, obviously he is a key player. I do think we take a tiny step back, so I don't believe that we're going to be in that European fight like we were last season. I think we're going to be on a beach. I think we're going to have a really comfortable season in the Premier League and kind of just prepare for the seasons to come. That is, if we do have Ivan Toney next season, if he doesn't get picked up in the January or summer transfer windows, I think we could have a really, really awesome year next year. I think this year is more of our staying power and staying in those really good positions to really settle ourselves as a for sure Premier League club. Next up, we have Brighton. Now, Brighton is going to be in Europe for the first time ever. They're going to be playing Europa League football this season. How does that affect their play? I mean, obviously, the other thing is that they have lost three crucial players, or at least they're going to lose three crucial players in McAllister, Caicedo, and Mitoma. It looks like all three of those players are going to be moving on, McAllister having already moved, and Caicedo and Mitoma being circled by massive clubs. But as Brighton always does, they have people in the reserves. I mean, heck, look at the fact that their left wing position, they used to have Trossard, then they moved on to Mitoma, and now this season, it looks like they're going to have Enciso. And that, for me, is their key player. I think Enciso has to perform at the same level as Mitoma before him and Trossard before him. I think if they continue to get that production out of that position, I feel like they will be very, very good. The other thing is I think that they may finally have solved their striker issue. They've picked up João Pedro. Can he finally produce from that center forward position? That is something that Brighton has never had. And then can the midfield be as good as they were last season with McAllister and Caicedo? Can they still perform at that level without them? And can the people that they have brought in to replace them do what they need to do? For me, because of all these changes that have occurred, as well as playing Europa League football, Brighton for me is going to have European chances. That's going to be where I'm going to be putting them. I don't think they have a chance at challenging for the Champions League, but I don't think they're going to take too far of a step back where they're going to be on a beach. I think they're still going to have a really good chance at getting into Europe. Next up, we're going to be talking about our first promoted club in Burnley. So, what do I think about Burnley? I think that with their season last year, they're going to be riding a massive high and wave of momentum going into the season, much like Fulham did last year. And I think they can start the season really well. Obviously, their first game is against Manchester City. Can they get a point or maybe even three out of that game and continue that momentum rolling? Or maybe do they get a 5-0 loss and just completely get stunted straight from the start? I don't see that happening. I think that they've really shored up their defense moving into the Premier League. They pick up the likes of Bayer and O'Shea, who I think will really be able to get that defense to the level it needs to be at the Premier League level. That being said, though, are they going to be able to get the same amount of goals that they did last year? Obviously, they've lost their top goal scorer from last year in Tella, as he was on loan from Southampton, who's now back in the Championship themselves, so they could definitely use him. But can a guy like Manuel Benson get into that same position where he's able to score a lot of goals, create a lot of chances that Tella was able to do? For me, he is the key player for Burnley. For me, if he is able to step up and produce even half the amount of goals that he did last season in the Championship, I think that would be a really crucial part for this team to move up. For me, though, because of how bad the bottom of the Premier League is this season, and I don't think Burnley's going to be a part of it. I think they're going to be on a beach pretty early. I think by April, they're going to be really safe and not worried about relegation. The question is, can they do something even more than Fulham did last year and fight for Europe? I think their floor is on a beach, and I think their ceiling is European chances. I really do believe that they're somewhere in that range. All right, next up we have Chelsea, and what is there to say about Chelsea? They finished 12th last season. Are they going to be any better this year? And my prediction is yes, they will be. I think last year they were having to deal with a lot of dead weight and players that had been on that Champions League winning team wanting playing time and therefore disrupting the locker room with the players that were just brought in under Potter's regime. Obviously, they went through a couple manager changes as well. I think they were just in a terrible situation. I think this year they move back up to their normal footing. Obviously, they've spent lots and lots of money on players, and I think last year they were playing a lot like an MLS All-Star team, and I think that they can go from being an All-Star team to being an actual team this season with a full off-season to prepare. The other thing is, though, a lot of their signings that they signed this summer are probably not going to be playing with them this season, as Nkunku just had a really large injury that's going to keep him out for a while. They obviously still have that injury to Fofana, and then one of their other players that they signed this summer, Ugachukwu, he's not going to be playing. He's going to be loaned out somewhere in France. So I think that if they're going to be successful, it's going to be with the players they brought in last season. So hopefully them working together is going to be good. My key player prediction this season is going to be Enzo Fernandez. Him be a little bit more attacking since he played a lot defensively last year. I don't think that's his best place. I think he'll be able to move forward in the pitch a little bit, and I think that will really help Chelsea. The other thing is they're not playing European football. That will help a lot in their preparation week to week. So I think that they're going to be back up to where they were before last season, and therefore I have them in that Champions League challenger spot. I'm sorry, I didn't show you guys me moving them in there, but that's exactly where I feel like they are going to be this season. All right, next up, we're going to have Crystal Palace, and this is the first time in 9 years that Crystal Palace will be without Wilfried Zaha. So how do they perform without him? That is the big question. Through his 9 seasons with Crystal Palace, he was able to be a contributor to 0.42 goals per 90 minutes. That is a massive amount of goals for a team that usually sits about mid-table. And then the other thing is they might be losing Michael Olise as well. And he has also been a huge part these past 2 seasons, providing 0.46 goals contribution per 90 minutes. So how does Crystal Palace find an entire goal per 90 minutes? For that reason, I have Eze as their key player this season. I think he needs to make that next step in his development and be that key player that can provide at least 0.4 goal contributions per game, because that's what they are losing in both Zaha and Olise. and I think that he needs to be that player for them. But either way, even with all of that, I do believe with the loss of Zaha and Olise that they have taken a massive step back in the number of goals that they're going to score. So for that reason, I'm actually going to put them down in the relegation battle this season. I think it's going to be tough for them to score goals, and I don't think that they're going to keep enough goals out to be able to rectify that situation. So I think that they're going to be fighting down there at the bottom with the other relegation battlers. All right, next up we have Everton, and Everton have been in a relegation battle the past 2 seasons, just barely escaping on the last day last year. So where do they go from there? I think that their team hasn't gotten worse throughout the off season. They have added Danjuma. Is he able to provide something for this team? I really don't see any sort of issue with them from last season, but the question is, can they get more points per 90 minutes than they were last year? Because frankly, it's not going to cut it. They can't do it again for a third year. This mediocrity has really played a toll in the complacency of the team. They're not playing with hunger, they're not playing with passion, and that's going to affect them if they get stuck down there for a third season in a row. My key player for them this season is going to be Iwobi. I mean, he's been a key player for them for years, but I think this year in particular is even more crucial under Sean Dyche's system. I think he really has to be that key playmaking and ball handling role. I think he can really do well with being on the ball in counterattack situations. And so I think that is going to be crucial for their success, particularly with scoring goals. I think they'll actually do a really good job defensively this year. We saw that at the end of last year. They were really strong defensively, but can they do that throughout an entire season under Dyche? That's yet to be seen. But either way, I have not seen enough of them this offseason to say that they're going to come out of that relegation battle. So that's exactly where I'm going to have them again this season. They're going to be right back down there at the bottom. All right, next up we have Fulham, and Fulham flew high last season. They were up in the European chances kind of category for a large part of last season, and then they kind of sustained a couple injuries that kind of made them take a step back. But the question is, can they do that again this season? I'm not entirely sure. They still have Marco Silva, who's an absolutely incredible manager, and I think he'll have them playing at a very high level. The question is, though, there has been a lot of concerns surrounding that club with regards to 2 very key players that they had last season in Mitrovic and Willian. Are they going to stay with the club? Are they not? If they do stay with the club, are they going to be happy with the club? I just don't know what the situation is going to be there. I don't know if it'll have effect on the locker room in the early season. So I don't see them flying quite that high again this season. I do say that their key player is going to be Palhinha. Once again, I think he is absolutely crucial. He was crucial to them last year. It was crazy that they were even able to sign him last season, and I think that it's awesome that they've been able to hold on to him. And I think he'll continue to play extremely well in that midfield. Also, their defense is still super good. Their pressing ability is super good. So I don't think they're going to take too much of a step back. I think they are going to be on a beach come April. I don't think they'll have to worry about any sort of relegation battle, but I don't see them flying quite as high as they did last year. All right, next up we have Liverpool. Is Liverpool going to be back this season? We saw them take a little bit of a dip last season after being within 1 point of Manchester City the previous season. For me, I feel like they have taken a step forward this offseason. They've kind of gotten rid of a lot of their older midfielders that had taken a step back in Klopp's system, and I think they've signed quite a few good young players, McAllister being the high point, and now it seems that like literally just tonight, it looks like Caicedo might be moving to Liverpool as well. And I think that with Caicedo and McAllister, just those 2 alone, I think that midfield will be significantly better. For that reason, I do have McAllister as their key player this year. They were severely lacking in creativity and goal-scoring ability in that midfield, and I think McAllister absolutely provides that for them, and being able to provide for Nunez, Gakpo, and Salah. And I think that team will take a significant step forward in terms of goal-scoring. So for that reason, I do have Liverpool up in that title chasing category. I seriously do believe that they will be back in form again this season, particularly with how they ended last season. I think they can be right up there again with those guys chasing the title. Okay, next up we have Luton Town, the absolute wonder story of the Premier League this season. Are they going to be able to stay up? The answer, it's going to be tough because let's be honest, they haven't really brought in anybody of note that could really elevate them to the Premier League level. They seem like they're just trying to keep their finances in order for their inevitable drop. The one thing that they are going to have going for them is this, they're trying to get to the sum of the parts are better than the parts themselves. And maybe that's true, but I looked at their home form, which is usually crucial for a relegation club trying to stay up, and their home form in the championship wasn't that great. So is it going to be any better in the Premier League? I'm not sure. Obviously, their hometown is going to be buzzing every single time that there's a Premier League game there. I think it will be a wonderful atmosphere every single time. I just don't know if they're going to be good enough to stay up. I think their key player this year is going to be their striker, their head man, Carlton Morris. He was involved in 26 goals last season for them in the championship, and I think he'll need to produce at least half of that if they want to have any sort of chance at staying up, because let's be honest, they're going to be putting 11 guys behind the ball, so it's going to be on him and anyone else that may or may not run forward with him to get those goals, and he has to produce at least 13, in my opinion, for that club to have anywhere near a chance at staying up. But at the end of the day, that's going to put them in that relegation battle tier. I don't see them being any higher than that. I hope and pray that they are going to be able to stay up, because I think that would be an absolute wonderful story. I just don't see it happening at the moment. All right, so we go now from the smallest club in the Premier League to the largest club in the Premier League. Welcome back, Manchester City. And what more is there to say? They are a title-winning club 3 years running. They just won the treble last year, and they may have lost a couple of players here and there. I think Gundogan specifically is a very tough one to lose. I think he was crucial in all three of the championships that they won last year. But I still think that, one, they have the two best players in the world right now. Not just in the Premier League, but possibly in the world, with Erling Haaland and Kevin De Bruyne. I really think both of those players are still at the top of their game. They also just brought in one of the best center backs in the world to go alongside Stones, Akanji, and Ake. I don't see them giving up very many goals, let alone being in a position where they're ever losing a game. So if they're never losing a game, how do they drop points? I just don't see that happening. I think Gvardiol and all those guys are going to be absolutely stout at the back. But with that, I think their key player this season is not Haaland, is not Kevin De Bruyne. I still think it's going to be Rodri. I think that he cemented himself as the best defensive midfielder in the world last year. I think he needs to sustain that level this season if they want to have a chance at repeating. And obviously with his ability to just, strike one out from 35 yards and put it into the back of the net, absolutely incredible. He's absolutely clutch when he needs to be. So I think that he is going to be their key player this year. And obviously I can't see them falling anywhere below the title chasers tier. I mean, come on, they're Manchester City. They're always going to be in with a shout. I think they're going to be right up there, first, second, third. Third is absolutely crazy to think about for a Pep Guardiola squad, but maybe it happens, but that is definitely where they're going to be. All right, and now we move to the other side of Manchester in the Red Devils of Manchester United. Can Erik ten Hag take that second season and build on what he did in his first season? In my opinion, I think they've only gotten better this offseason. They've gotten rid of some of the dead weight in the club, and I think that he's brought in a lot of energy to the club. He's brought in Onana, who is an absolute huge get for the club. It's a huge upgrade from what they've had in David De Gea. They've also brought in Mason Mount, and they've also brought in Rasmus Højlund. Is he going to be able to solve their number 9 problem? They've had great wing play, but is that striker position now solved for Erik ten Hag? I think that's yet to be seen. In my opinion, though, I think that key player is still going to be Marcus Rashford. I think he had an absolute breakout season last year, and I think if he can build on that this season with even just evening up what he was able to do last year and just replicate it, I think that would be huge, because I think there will be more production from other areas in the squad, and they could take that next step. for me, they're going to actually be in that title chasing opportunity. I think they're going to be maybe up there for a large part of the season. Maybe they're not there at the end of the season, but I think for a large portion of it, they have a pretty good chance at giving the other players in that territory a scare. I think they have a really good squad and they have a chance at making it work. Okay, next up is going to be Nottingham Forest. They had an incredible season last season, and they were pretty early on able to kind of stay out of that relegation territory. And I think that they have a really good chance at making that happen again. They haven't really lost anybody, and that was a possibility with both Brendan Johnson and Gibbs White kind of being looked at by some larger clubs, but neither one has moved on. So I think that their attack has only gotten better with the addition of Elanga from Manchester United. I think both of their wings are now covered, so I think they will actually be scoring more goals than they did last season. They've also managed to sign a new goalkeeper. Is he going to be better than they had last season? That's yet to be determined. For me, their key player is going to be Gibbs White once again this season. I think if he can continue to create goals in the manner that he was able to last year, they will once again be in that same position where they're going to be nice and safe, and they can really establish themselves as a perennial Premier League club. I also think that, once again, that bottom part of the Premier League is a lot worse than it was last year. I think they're going to have good chances at picking up points in places. So for me, they're going to be on a beach come April time. I don't think they're going to have to be worrying about a relegation battle. And I don't think that they're anywhere close to Europe just yet. All right, next up, let's talk about Newcastle. The new kids on the block. Are they going to be able to repeat the success that they had last year? I think that they're going to take a tiny bit of a step back just because they will be in Champions League football. The question is, though, how far do they go in Champions League football? Because they could get stuck in a group that's, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, and then they're the pot 3 team. Are they going to be able to get out of a group like that? Or could they be in a group where they end up winning it and then continuing on from there? I think it depends on how early they exit the Champions League versus how good they do this season. They have added some depth in areas, but I just don't think that I see enough depth for them to perform very well in the Champions League and in the Premier League. I think the level of the Premier League is a little bit too high for that. So for that reason, I think they'll take a tiny bit of a step back where they won't be challenging for the title. I do think that their defense is still very, very good. They were one of the best defenses in the entire Premier League last year. Maybe they're not at that same level with, Arsenal and Manchester City being at world-class defense levels. I don't think Newcastle will be quite there, but I think they'll be, 1B in terms of tiers of defense. So I still think that just a few goals here and there will be able to score them a lot of points. For that reason, I think their key player is going to be Joe Linton. I think with the ability that he has in the midfield to be able to go box to box is really, really good. And I think that he is going to be able to provide a lot for that Newcastle team in the Premier League specifically. So I think that he is going to be crucial to their success. But for the reasons that I explained, I think they're going to be just a Champions League challenger this year. I don't see them being a title chaser quite yet. All right, next up, we're going to be talking about the last promoted club on this list, Sheffield United. Sheffield United is a very interesting case because instead of being like the teams of last year that were promoted, they have actually sold off a couple of their best players instead of buying players to add to their existing squad. It's going to be a very interesting season for them. I feel like they are going to find it very difficult to perform at the same level as they were last year in the championship. I think it's going to be very difficult for them to do so this year. For me, their key player is their brand new guy, Vinny Souza. He's going to be coming in to try to take over where Sandberg was last season. Is he going to be able to perform at that same level or even at a level higher? I think it's going to be crucial for them, especially with them having to defend so much this season because they're not going to have a lot of the ball with the talent that they have on the pitch. For me, it's going to be pretty easy. They're going to be down there in the relegation battle with Luton Town in terms of the promoted clubs. I don't think they're anywhere near the level that even Bournemouth was at last season when they were promoted, so I think it's going to be a very difficult season for them. Now we come to the most difficult one that it has been to prepare for, Tottenham Hotspur. I say that it's been very difficult to prepare for them because the entire Harry Kane saga, is he staying, is he going, We were not sure, but as of recording this right now, it looks like Bayern Munich is going to land Harry Kane. So that means Tottenham will be without Harry Kane for the first time in about a decade. How are they going to perform without him? That is the question. The other glaring issue that they have is that they have such a weak backline. They have one of the weakest backlines in the Premier League, in my opinion. Outside of Romero, where is their defensive ability? I just don't see it. So for that reason, their crucial player is going to be Romero for me. Because for me, they need a defender who is going to be rock solid year round. And if they have a guy who gets injured in Romero, I think their backline completely falls apart, and they could be looking at a season like Chelsea's last year, where they are, come April still fighting against relegation. But I still think that their attack is good enough to get goals here and there. They still have Son, they still have Kulusevski. I think that they're still able to produce goals. But for me, with Harry Kane gone, they're nowhere near Champions League level. I think they have chances at Europe, but I don't think it's going to be any more than that. We move on to the penultimate team in West Ham United, our last of our London clubs. How are they going to perform this season? It is going to be an absolute mystery once again, in my opinion, because last year they absolutely struggled with playing in Europe in the Premier League, and that was with Declan Rice. Now, obviously, with that Declan Rice, they've been able to go after a couple of signings that maybe they wouldn't have been able to. They've already signed Edson Alvarez to try to be that kind of replacement. I don't think he's at the same level as Rice, but he's definitely a decent enough player to play in that position. They're looking at McTominay. I know that they're already in agreement to sign Harry Maguire, which could be crucial to their defense. And then also they're looking at James Ward-Prowse. For me, this could be one of the greatest set-piece teams in Premier League, like maybe even history, with looking at it if they bring in James Ward-Prowse and Harry Maguire, because you have James Ward-Prowse that can just score off of free kicks or deliver great free kicks. You have Maguire, Zuma, and Antonio who can all just, rise up above the defense. I think it'll be a very interesting season for them. I think they'll score a bunch, but I think once again that lack of depth in playing in Europe will hamper them. I think in the Premier League they're still not going to be close to that top 7 area, especially with some other teams like Chelsea and Tottenham that aren't even playing European football. So they're going to have a lot of time in between to rest and get players back up to where they need to be. So for me, they're going to be on a beach come April time. I think they have one of the better chances of those teams in that tier that could take that next step to the European level. But I think without Declan Rice, that team is going to be a little bit worse off, even with the number of signings they bring in, just because of the technical ability that Rice was able to give to that team. And normally I would say last and not least, but in this case it might be the least, because we're going to be talking about Wolverhampton Wanderers, and that is a club that is in complete disarray at the moment. I think that Wolves are absolutely struggling. They unloaded about 5 starters from their team. Not only that, they just fired their manager the week of the season starting. That is a crazy thing to me. Now, obviously, they have signed Gary O'Neill, which helped keep Bournemouth up last season. Can he do that job again for the Wolves this season? That is their only saving grace, in my opinion. But I can't see, with everything that they have had happen to them throughout the season, them being any higher than that relegation battle. I do think that their key player is going to be Cunha, the guy that they just signed for £50 million. Obviously, he was on loan with them last year, but this season's even more crucial that he actually takes a step in being a crucial goal-scoring role for them, because he only scored 2 goals last season. He's got to do better than that this season, and that is where Wolves lie in that relegation battle. Now it is time to put everything from this tier list into this beautiful ranking right here. We are going to be starting at the bottom in number 20th place. I'm going to have Sheffield United. Let's go ahead and make them appear. There we go. And I think that they have not done anything to improve their squad. In fact, they think they've gotten worse from last year, and that is no way to enter a Premier League season. After that, I think I have Luton Town. They haven't gotten any worse, which is something better than Sheffield United, but they haven't gotten much better, and I don't think that they will have the kind of home form that they need to stay up. nor do I think that they're going to be in that 18th spot where they're just missing out on staying up. I think they pretty comfortably go down here. After that, though, I do have Wolves. Um, Unlike last season, I have two of the promoted clubs going back down, but I think Wolves is going to be that Leicester from last season, where even if they have players there that are of good quality, they're not going to be able to stay up just because they've lost so much and there's really no investment, much like Leicester from last season. I think eventually, even with Gary O'Neill, they are going to end up faltering and going down. Once again, in 17th spot, I have Everton. I don't see them getting any better than 17th this season. I don't see where they've taken a step up, but I do think Sean Dyche is going to be able to do enough of a job to keep them out of a relegation once again this season. After that, I do have Crystal Palace. This is strange because Crystal Palace has made a home of that 11th and 12th spot in the Premier League, but I do think without Wilfried Zaha, they are going to take a massive step back, so that's where I have them. In 15th place, we're going to have Fulham. I do think that they aren't going to have that same momentum coming into this season that they had last year. So I think that they're going to end up falling in that 15th spot. And then after that, we do have Bournemouth. I think they will perform a little bit better than Fulham. I think they actually do have momentum going into this season, and I don't see where they've gotten any worse, whereas Fulham does have that kind of controversial stuff going on with Mitrovic and everything like that. The one thing I do say is that they don't have Gary O'Neill anymore. How does that team perform without him? That is my one question, but I do think that they will finish 14th. After that is Burnley. The other promoted club, I think they do have a very good season. I think they end up pretty comfortable, and I think by the end of the season they actually drop quite a few points. Maybe they are in like 10th come April, and I think they may end up dropping back down into like 13th because of their complacency at the end of the season. After that, I do have Nottingham Forest. Nottingham Forest, I think, has only gotten better in the attack. They haven't lost any of their key attackers, and I think that is going to propel them into scoring quite a few goals in situations against those bottom 4 or 5 clubs. West Ham, I do have after that. Like I said, their performance in Europe, I think, will be better than their performance in the Premier League, but I do still think that they will perform very well. After that, I have Brentford. That may be a bit hopeful for this season without Ivan Toney and David Raya, but I do think that the other people can get into those spots and perform a little bit better with Kevin Schade, Keane Lewis-Potter, and Johan Wissa being able to kind of take on that role. After that, I have Tottenham Hotspur. Without Harry Kane, I don't see them being any higher than 9th. I don't see them making it to Europe this season. I think that they will do a little bit better come the end of the season as the team comes together, but they will take a massive step back without Harry Kane. And I do think maybe in the January transfer window they're able to get somebody that can really help them out, but I don't think the start of the season will go very well for them. After that, I have Brighton, just missing Europe this season. I do think, much like West Ham, they will perform better in Europe than they are going to perform in the Premier League, but they have just lost so many crucial pieces that I don't see them falling into the European places this year, especially with the improvement of Chelsea. That was a big reason they were able to get into Europe last year. So I think that Brighton, right there at 8th, is a very good spot for them. After that, I have Aston Villa. This is the first team that made a surprise appearance in Europe last season that I think will sustain that ability. I think they've gotten a lot better. And I do think that with the additions that they have made, as loyal as them having Unai Emery, who I think is, a top 5 manager in the Premier League this season, I think he's going to be able to propel them to heights that maybe they wouldn't have been able to get to before. After that, I have Newcastle just missing out on the Champions League places, or the presumed Champions League places this year. I think that they will perform very well. I think they'll be fighting for it the entire season. It may even come down to the last weekend that they are fighting with the team I have in 5th, but I think that they will eventually just miss out to Chelsea. I think that will be the team that ends up being in 5th. I don't see them fighting the teams that are in the top 4 just yet in this season. I think if Pochettino gets them playing well, they may have a good chance in the 24-25 season, especially with the amount of money that they're able to just throw about willy-nilly. But without Fofana and Nkunku for a large portion of the season at least, I think they will struggle in that early portion. And I think that the top 4 teams are just better than them. So let's get to those top 4 teams. Let's go ahead and start with fourth, where I have Manchester United. I do feel that they are still lacking just a tiny bit of quality and depth. And especially with them returning to Champions League football this season, they may end up having that bit of a struggle, especially if they get a key injury or two. Maybe if Fernandez gets injured, even if especially if Rashford gets injured, I think they will struggle. And it's been a struggle for a lot of young strikers such as Højlund to kind of take that next step when it comes to their first season in the Premier League. We saw it with Nunez last year. Even though he scored 20 plus goals, it wasn't quite at the level as we expected. I think we'll see that same thing with Højlund this first season. I think he'll take that next step next season. So for this year, I'll have him in fourth. After that, the top 3, in my opinion, are all neck and neck. I see any one of these 3 could win the title for me. I think Manchester United is that 1B category where if everything goes right for them, they can win the title, but I think they will miss out quite handily. But these top 3, I could see us having a very tight 3-way race for the title this season. So I will go ahead and start with my title winners for these top 3. And for me, where can you go wrong with all reliable? It's got to be Manchester City. With Haaland, De Bruyne still there, it's just impossible to go against them. They're going to be scoring so many goals once again this year. And who knows, maybe they pick up some of these team players that they're looking at, like Olise and Mitoma, and they're just able to perform at a level because everyone goes to Manchester City and just performs better. So I still have them in that number 1 spot. I can't see them losing. So then we'll go to second place, where I do have Arsenal. Once again, I think Arsenal is going to provide them with a massive scare. Again, it could come down to the last weekend of the season where we're seeing Arsenal, Manchester City duking it out all the way down the stretch. And I think right behind them is going to be Liverpool. This could be a season where you could see the top 3 separated by 3 points, in my opinion. I think Liverpool has only taken that step forward, and you cannot go against Klopp. I think he is the second best manager in the world right now, only behind Pep Guardiola. I think it's Guardiola and Klopp right there at the top, so it's hard to vote against them, but I do think that they have just a little bit lacking in quality compared to Arsenal, which is why I have them there. And I think Arsenal will be fighting with tooth and nail to try to get that title this season. I do think they fall short, though. So that is my Premier League predictions. I do hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, go ahead and hit subscribe. We've got some big projects coming down the line that I don't think you guys will want to miss out on. Plus the fact we can do some good Premier League roundups coming throughout the season. We're also going to be doing some American football predictions as well. So if you guys are a fan of both sports, go ahead and subscribe and tune into those as well. But for now, this is Silver Knight, and I hope you guys have a great day.